In 1956, 6 nuns from St. Mary's Convent vanished during a storm that swallowed the Texas hill country whole. Their beds were made, their rosaries left in perfect circles, and on the chapel door, a single note: "Deliverance begins in silence." For 70 years, the church kept the case sealed, the convent abandoned, and the town whispered about what really happened that night: devotion, madness, or something buried far deeper than faith. Then, in 2025, a forgotten confession surfaced, and the arrest that followed shocked everyone who still believed in miracles. If you love uncovering long-buried mysteries and the secrets that outlast faith itself, hit that subscribe button. The storm broke over the convent at exactly 10:14 p.m., the first flash of lightning revealing the red clay road that led to St. Mary's Hill, slick, serpentine, and soon to be impassable. From her cell window, Sister Aurelia Dawn watched the trees bend like penitents. The wind hummed through the rafters, and for a moment, she thought she heard singing from the courtyard below. But it wasn't the hour for singing. Vespers had ended 2 hours ago. The convent should have been silent, except for the rain. Still, the melody drifted upward, faint and uncertain, 6 voices braided into one. She leaned closer to the glass, her breath fogging the pain. Down below, the cloister lamps flickered. A figure moved near the statue of the Virgin, robes pressed by wind, head bowed in prayer. Or something that looked like prayer. The next flash of lightning swallowed her sight. When it faded, the courtyard was empty. Aurelia crossed herself, then went to find Mother Hildegard, the abbess. The corridor smelled of damp wool and incense. Water dripped from the ceiling in a slow metronome. As she passed each cell, she saw the sliver of candlelight under the doors, except 6, where darkness pooled like oil. Sister Margaret's door was ajar. Inside, the bed was made, the habit neatly folded, the crucifix still hanging above the pillow. A rosary lay on the nightstand, its beads arranged in a perfect circle, as if waiting. "Sister Margaret?" Aurelia whispered. The silence answered. By the time she reached the abbess's chamber, thunder had begun to roll in endless waves. Mother Hildegard stood at her desk, the emergency lantern burning low beside a half-written letter. Her pen trembled slightly in her hand. "They're gone," Aurelia said, breathless. Hildegard's eyes did not widen. "I know." The words rooted Aurelia to the floor. "Then we must call—" "No one," Hildegard interrupted. Her voice was calm, deliberate, ancient. "We do not call anyone tonight." Lightning tore the sky again. For an instant, the abbess's face looked carved in stone. Resolve and terror fused. "They left a note," she said, handing Aurelia a damp scrap of paper. The ink had bled, but the words were legible. "Deliverance begins in silence." Aurelia felt her throat close. "What does it mean?" "It means," Hildegard said, "the ritual has begun again." Before Aurelia could ask more, the bell tower groaned above them, a sound like a lung-drawing breath. Then, impossibly, the great bell tolled. Once, twice, 6 times. It should not have been possible. The rope had been cut after curfew. The storm roared louder, drowning everything but the bell's final echo. When the police arrived at dawn, the convent doors were barred from the inside. The sisters who remained refused to speak. Every record, every diary, every ledger was confiscated and sealed in the diocesan archives. The investigation lasted 3 months, then disappeared under a single sentence in the report: insufficient evidence. The world forgot. Until, 70 years later, a graduate researcher named Clara Vale opened a mislabeled file in the Austin Archdiocesan Library and found a photograph of 6 veiled women standing in a rain-soaked courtyard. Time-stamped March 12, 1956, the night they vanished. Behind them, faintly visible through the lightning, a 7th shadow lingered. The letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, folded twice, edges soft with age. It bore no return address, only the embossed seal of the Diocese of Waco and a name scrawled across the front. Dr. Clara Vale, University of Texas, Department of Historical Anthropology. Clara almost didn't open it. She assumed it was another rejection for her grant renewal. Instead, a single sheet of cream paper slid out, the ink faint and trembling. If you value the truth of the Six Sisters, come to St. Mary's Hill before the last bell. R. No signature, no date. Only a postmark from a rural parish that hadn't existed on any map since the 1960s. She set it aside, but by evening she was driving west. The road wound through the empty plains, telephone wires humming in the wind. Her headlights caught the outlines of derelict barns, their roofs caved in like broken wings. She told herself this was fieldwork, a curiosity, nothing more, but she knew better. Since she'd found that photograph, sleep had been fragile. The image of the seventh shadow haunted the edges of every dream. At 9:14 p.m., the old convent came into view. St. Mary's Hill stood like a scar above the river, its bell tower black against the storm-thick sky. Decades of abandonment had stripped it to its bones. Windows gaped, ivy choked the cloister, and the main gate hung askew. Her rental car sputtered to a stop beside the weathered sign, "Property of the Diocese. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Inside the courtyard, the air smelled of limestone and damp leaves. She raised her flashlight, the beam slicing through drifting rain. The statues along the colonnade had been decapitated by time, their torsos glistening. "Hello?" Her voice echoed off stone. Nothing. Then, from the shadows of the chapel door, a figure moved. A man, stooped, wrapped in a heavy coat. "You came," he said. His voice was rough, threaded with age. Clara stepped back. "Who are you?" "Raymond Bell. Groundskeeper once, maybe the last one alive who remembers that night." His face was pale, lips tremoring slightly, eyes glassed with rheum but bright beneath. He gestured toward the chapel. "Come inside, it's almost time." She hesitated but followed. The interior was a ruin of plaster and ash. Moonlight poured through the collapsed roof, silvering the puddles on the floor. At the far end, where the altar once stood, a wooden chair faced the shadows. On it rested a metal box, no larger than a Bible, engraved with a cross. Raymond sat beside it. "I kept this locked for 70 years. "What is it?" "The confession." He lifted the lid. Inside lay a cassette recorder wrapped in linen. He pressed play. A hiss, then a woman's voice, thin and trembling. "This is Sister Aurelia Dawn. March 12th, 1956. To whoever finds this, forgive what we have done. The light was never ours to summon. The silence, it feeds on obedience." The tape crackled. Rain beat harder against the broken windows. Clara leaned closer. "Where did you get this?" "Buried under the chapel steps," Raymond said. "I found it when they ordered me to seal the vault. The priest said destroy everything, but I couldn't. The sound..." He stopped, shaking. "You ever hear something that doesn't stop when you cover your ears?" Clara felt a chill creep up her spine. "You're saying you heard them?" He nodded. 6 voices. Every year, same night, same hour. The bell rings once for each of them. Tonight makes 70. The recorder clicked off. She tried to speak, but something else filled the air. A faint vibration, like the low hum of glassware before it shatters. Raymond's eyes widened. "It's starting." The bell tower groaned above them. One deep toll, then another. Clara looked up through the hole in the roof. The bell swayed in silhouette against lightning, though its ropes hung limp. She grabbed Raymond's arm. "Who's ringing it?" He smiled faintly. "No one ever has to." The final chime rolled through the valley, lingering like breath. When it faded, silence returned. thicker than before. Raymond stood, moving toward the altar. They'll come for me now. They always said confession ends in surrender. Before Clara could react, he reached into his coat and drew a small iron key. He placed it on the altar beside the recorder. For the archive, he said. For someone who still believes truth matters. Raymond. He turned, eyes bright with something between peace and madness. Tell them the seventh never left. A sound followed. Soft, almost kind. A sigh, or the closing of a door she hadn't seen. When her flashlight flickered back to life, Raymond Bell was gone. Only the empty chair remained. Rain began again, steady and relentless. Clara stood in the doorway, staring at the bell tower. For a moment, she thought she saw movement. A pale outline near the belfry window, the shape of a woman looking down. Then lightning struck the weather vane, and the figure dissolved in white. The storm didn't stop until morning. Morning light struck through the blinds like confession bars, cutting the motel room into stripes of dust and silence. Clara Vale hadn't slept. The cassette recorder sat on the table beside the cold coffee and a notebook filled with restless handwriting. She'd replayed the tape 3 times before dawn, each time hearing something new beneath Sister Aurelia's voice. A faint clicking, rhythmic, mechanical, like the turning of beads. Now, in the pale morning, it sounded almost like prayer. Her laptop blinked awake. She began typing field notes. Subject: recovered audio artifact, St. Mary's Convent, Bell County. Speaker: Sister Aurelia Dawn, ID confirmed via 1955 Diocese Census. Context: confessional testimony recorded night of disappearance, March 12, 1956. Status: uncatalogued, ecclesiastical property. Chain of custody: unknown. She stopped. The cursor blinked at her, expectant. Something inside her resisted turning it into data. At 8:15 a.m., she loaded her car and began the 2-hour drive back to Austin. The sky had cleared, the air washed clean by the storm. Yet the world looked newly hollow. Fences bowed, trees twisted, the landscape muted as if listening. Halfway down Route 9, she glanced at the passenger seat. The metal box sat there, glinting softly. She caught herself driving slower, as if afraid the thing could break or breathe. The Austin Archdiocesan Library occupied a brutalist building of gray stone and green glass, an institution allergic to sunlight. Clara signed in under her research permit and made her way to the 3rd floor, restricted ecclesiastical archives, post-war period. The archivist on duty, Isaac Moreau, barely looked up from his desk when she arrived. "You're early," he murmured, voice like sandpaper. "I found something at St. Mary's Hill." She placed the recorder gently on the counter. He blinked. "That place is condemned." Apparently, not condemned enough. She explained in low tones. The letter, the caretaker, the tape. When she finished, Isaac stared at the object as if it might open its own mouth and speak. "I worked here 12 years, he said finally. "I've seen maybe 3 items the diocese didn't want found. 2 were burned. 1 disappeared." He picked up the recorder delicately, like a priest lifting a relic. "You want this authenticated?" "I want to know why Sister Aurelia made it," Clara said. "And what happened after she did." Isaac sighed. "Then you'll need the C file." "What's that?" C stands for Cloistered Incidents. Internal records, sealed after Vatican approval. You won't find them in any database. He typed a code, slid his key card through a reader. A hidden door clicked open behind the filing wall. A narrow hallway lined with temperature-controlled drawers. The light buzzed faintly overhead. "Section 12B, he said. "If it exists, it'll be there." Clara followed. The air was cool, smelling faintly of ozone and paper dust. Her footsteps echoed like footsteps in a tomb. She found the drawer labeled St. Mary's Hill, 1956, and slid it open. Inside lay 6 files, each marked with a name and a crimson wax seal. Sister Margaret, Sister Helena, Sister Dvora, Sister Rosa, Sister Inez, Sister Sabine. No mention of Aurelia. Her stomach tightened. She's missing. Isaac frowned. Maybe not part of the 6, but the voice. He shrugged. The church has a talent for omission. Each file contained photographs, personal letters, and medical records stamped internal discipline, classified. The most recent entry dated March 11, 1956. Clara skimmed the pages. Each woman had been transferred to St. Mary's within 6 months of one another. Each had previously served in a different parish. Each had reported episodes of ecstatic silence. "What does that mean?" she whispered. Isaac leaned closer. "It's code. I've seen it before in post-war psychiatric reports. Usually means dissociative trances during prayer, sometimes auditory phenomena. Hallucinations. Or revelations." Clara stared at the names again. 6 women with the same symptom, relocated to the same convent, all vanished the same night. And no one followed up? Isaac closed the drawer. Sometimes silence is easier to preserve than explain. That evening, back in her apartment, Clara digitized the tape. She watched the sound waves crawl across the screen in blue lines. Beneath the spoken words, she isolated the clicking noise she'd heard earlier and slowed it to half speed. It wasn't beads. It was breathing. A pattern. 6 short inhales, 1 long exhale, like the rhythm of collective prayer. She replayed it again. A whisper flickered between the breaths, so faint it might have been the mind inventing sound. But when she enhanced the volume, words began to emerge. We did not vanish. We were called. Her throat went dry. She saved the file, labeled it Aurelia_01.wav, and shut the laptop. Outside, the city hummed, the sound of buses, neon, ordinary life. Yet she felt the room tilt slightly, as if some unseen current had begun to pull her toward something older, colder. The recorder sat on her desk, the iron key beside it. She should have turned it over to the diocese, or at least to the university's ethics board. Instead, she found herself holding the key, feeling its chill. On one side, etched in faint Latin, sub carne lux, light beneath flesh. She whispered the words aloud, half in awe, half in fear. The lamp flickered. A moment later, the faintest sound rose from the recorder, a hiss, then a breath. She hadn't pressed play. By the next morning, the air outside Clara's apartment smelled of wet asphalt and early winter. She hadn't slept. The cassette recorder sat silent now, the iron key lying beside it like a punctuation mark. She brewed coffee, sat down, and opened her laptop. Her notes had grown into a labyrinth of references, cross-linked names, convent locations, Vatican directives, marginalia from diocesan papers. But every line led to the same dead end. 6 names, 6 files. No mention of Sister Aurelia Dawn. She tried another approach. At the university's digital archives, she searched parish rosters from the 1940s through the 1950s, filtering by religious orders in the Diocese of Waco. Dozens of results appeared, then narrowed to one entry that made her pulse quicken. Order of St. Veronica. Founded 1939. Dissolved 1956. Primary site, St. Mary's Hill Convent. The personnel list loaded slowly. There were 7 names. Aurelia's was the last, but her status was marked in red. Excommunicated, record sealed by papal decree. She leaned back, whispering the word aloud. Excommunicated. For a nun in the 1950s, it was worse than death. She opened a side window for diocesan bulletins from that year. Only one referenced the order, dated March 19, 1956. The Order of St. Veronica has been officially dissolved following a period of internal conflict and doctrinal deviation. No further inquiry is authorized. No further inquiry. The bureaucratic grave. Clara stared at the words until her vision blurred. Then she clicked over to an old database of declassified psychological studies from the mid-century. She wasn't even sure what she was looking for until she found it. An entry tagged, Project Canticle. Filed under Department of Ecclesiastical Anthropology, Vatican Liaison Program, 1953 to 1956. The description was clinical, detached. Objective: to study phenomena of induced ecstatic silence among cloistered religious groups. Hypothesis: exposure to controlled sensory deprivation and liturgical repetition may evoke preternatural cognition. Clara felt her stomach tighten. Initial cohort: 6 subjects, female post-war trauma survivors, religious volunteers. Location: St. Mary's Hill. Addendum: a 7th subject, Sister Aurelia Dawn, added off record at supervising clergy's request. The funding signature at the bottom was unmistakable: Father Adrien Lemaire. O.P. She remembered that name from her undergraduate theology readings. A Dominican scholar exiled from Rome in 1957 for heretical experimentation. He disappeared soon after. She sat frozen, staring at the screen. They'd been test subjects. Not saints, not martyrs. Experiments. Her phone buzzed, startling her. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Dr. Vale? The voice was male, formal, carrying a faint European accent. Yes, this is Father Adrien Lemaire. I believe you've been looking for me. She gripped the phone tighter. That's not possible. You'd be dead. So they said, but the church buries its mistakes. It does not erase them. A pause, the sound of static like distant rain. Do you still have the recording? He asked. She swallowed. Yes. Then you've already heard them. He let the words hang before continuing. If you want to understand what happened to those women, come to San Jacinto Mission tonight. Bring the tape. Come alone. The line went dead. By dusk, Clara was driving south, the city dissolving into dark highway. The air turned heavier the closer she got to the river. The mission sat on a bluff above the floodplain, half church, half ruin. Built before Texas was Texas. Its bell tower leaned, its roof sagged, yet the candles inside still burned. A single car waited near the steps, a black 1950s Chevrolet, immaculate. A man stood beside it, tall and spare, wearing a long coat. His white hair fell to his collar, and his eyes gleamed with a strange lucidity that made her think of lightning caught in glass. Father Lemaire? He nodded, smiling faintly. So they finally sent a scholar instead of an inquisitor. I'm not with the church. Good. Neither am I. He led her inside. The chapel was bare except for a crucifix and a table scattered with notebooks. On the wall behind him hung 6 portraits, sepia photographs of the missing nuns. Each had a small cut in the shape of a cross over the heart. You knew them, she said quietly. I trained them, he answered. They were chosen for their devotion, for their willingness to confront silence. We believed the divine could be reached by stripping away the senses, by turning prayer inward until the self dissolved. We were wrong. He gestured toward the crucifix. When the silence answered back, it wasn't God. Clara felt the hairs rise on her arms. You're saying something else spoke? He met her eyes. Something ancient. The church feared it, so they erased the order and excommunicated Aurelia. She refused to stop the ritual. Why her? She thought she could contain it. She thought faith was stronger than hunger. He opened a small notebook, pages yellowed with time. Symbols filled the margins, circles intersecting, Latin fragments, sound patterns. In the center, one phrase repeated over and over, sub carne lux. Clara touched the page. Light beneath flesh. It wasn't metaphor, Lemaire said softly. It was the instruction. Lightning flickered through the stained glass, illuminating the old man's face. You brought the tape?" She nodded, handing it to him. He placed it on the altar, pressed play. Aurelia's voice filled the space, echoing through the vaulted ceiling. But as it reached the line, "The silence feeds on obedience," something else bled through the speaker, a low pulse, resonant, inhuman. Lemaire's expression hardened. "It's still active? What is?" "The prayer." The lights dimmed. From somewhere beyond the chapel door came a sound like slow footsteps on stone. Clara's breath caught. "Someone else is here." Lemaire shook his head. "No one living." He turned, voice steady. "When you leave this place, Dr. Vale, understand, truth has appetite. It remembers who touches it. The last thing she saw before the power failed was the crucifix trembling on its chain." The mission was still dark when Clara Vale opened her eyes. For a moment she didn't remember falling asleep. Candlelight licked the walls in uneven bands. Somewhere beyond the chapel doors, something dripped steadily. Water or blood, she couldn't tell. "Father Lemaire," she whispered. No answer. The cassette lay on the altar, the tape spooled out like entrails. The recorder had burned hot. She could smell it, metal and ozone. When she touched it, her fingers came away blackened with ash. She looked toward the nave. The old priest's coat hung on the back of a pew, but the man himself was gone. On the floor beside the coat lay his notebook, pages torn halfway through. The last entry was a single line, scrawled in haste. "The door opens beneath the altar." Clara hesitated, then knelt. The flagstones were uneven. When she brushed away the dust, she felt a draft exhale through the cracks. A hidden seam traced a rectangle in the stone. She found the iron key still in her pocket, the one Raymond Bell had given her. It fit perfectly into a concealed lock. With a twist, the panel released, grinding upward. Cold air surged from below, carrying a smell of wax and wet limestone. A staircase descended into darkness. She hesitated only once, then switched on her flashlight and began to climb down. The passage widened into a vaulted chamber lined with shelving. Glass jars, sealed tins, labeled envelopes, all neatly arranged, untouched for decades. Dust lay thick as pollen. Her beam caught a brass plate bolted to the wall. Canticle Archive /1954-1956/authorized personnel. Only she moved closer, heart pounding. Folders marked Subject 01 to 06 lined the top shelf, each tagged with a date and the same insignia, a stylized sunburst behind a cruciform eye. At the far end stood a single metal door painted red. Someone had written across it in chalk, "Subcarn Lux." She pushed. The hinges wailed. Inside, the room was circular, domed, its walls coated in a strange reflective resin. A stone table occupied the center, fitted with leather straps. Above it hung a lattice of copper wires leading to an ancient generator in the corner. Photographs lay scattered on the floor. Women in habits seated around the table, eyes closed, mouths covered with white veils. Beside them, notes in Latin and French, Phase 3, complete sensory occlusion, subject reports, internal radiance. Clara felt her pulse hammering. She crouched to examine one photo more closely. The faces were blurred by exposure, but one, Aurelia's, was clear. Her hands were clasped, yet faint light seemed to seep through her fingers, as if her skin were translucent. A hum filled the air. The generator, dead for 70 years, shuddered once, then again. The filament tubes along the ceiling flickered weakly, throwing pale illumination across the walls. On the stone table lay a shape covered by canvas. She reached for the edge, hesitating. Then she pulled it back. Beneath was a plaster effigy of a woman's torso, smooth, white, almost beautiful, until she saw that beneath the thin shell, veins of gold light pulsed faintly, running like arteries. Her breath caught. It wasn't sculpture. It was preservation. A tag hung from the wrist. Specimen 07, Aurelia Dawn. Added outside initial cohort. Containment status, unresolved. For a heartbeat, she could swear the chest moved. She staggered back, knocking over a jar. The glass shattered. Instantly, the lights flared. A whisper filled the room, not from any direction but from the air itself. Deliverance begins. In silence. The words rippled through the metal. The generator coughed, then died. Darkness swallowed everything except the faint glow beneath the effigy's skin. Clara forced herself to move. She grabbed a handful of documents, stuffed them into her bag, and turned toward the stairs. The tunnel behind her seemed longer now, breathing. The air thickened with the scent of incense and iron. Halfway up, she heard another sound. Soft footfalls following. "Father Lemaire?" Silence, then, almost kindly, "You heard it too." The voice was female, gentle, familiar. She spun, flashlight trembling. Nothing, only the open chamber below, the faint golden light fading. When she reached the surface, dawn was rising. The mission bells tolled once, though no one stood in the tower. She drove back toward Austin with her windows down, trying to breathe, but the scent of wax clung to her clothes. Her mind replayed the whisper, the veins of light under the skin, the seventh specimen. At a red light she pulled over, opened the file she'd taken. Inside were typed observations signed by Dr. Adrienne Lemaire. Subject 07 displays residual luminescence following prolonged isolation. Claims to perceive voices within the silence. Requests to continue the ritual independently. Recommendation, termination. Another page followed, handwritten in trembling script. I refuse. The light was never meant to end with me. A day. Clara sat motionless, the city waking around her. She looked at her hands gripping the wheel, small veins visible beneath the skin, pulsing faintly in the dawn. For the first time, she wondered if what she'd brought back wasn't just evidence. By mid-morning, the sunlight over Austin looked wrong. Too white, too clean, like a photograph overexposed. Clara Vale drove with one hand on the wheel, the other pressed to her wrist. The faint shimmer beneath her skin hadn't faded. It pulsed with her heartbeat. Subtle as breath, but there. The documents on the passenger seat fluttered each time she accelerated. She'd read them 3 times between stoplights. The signatures were authentic. Lemaire's handwriting, his seal. But there was another signature at the bottom of several pages, a name she didn't recognize. Frater Alaric de Vaux. She parked outside the university archives and hurried up the stone steps. The building was still half empty at that hour. Dust motes spun in the shafts of light between stained glass windows. Professor Ellen Cross looked up from her desk when Clara entered. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Clara said. She spread the papers across the table. "I need you to verify these. Chemical aging, ink composition, all of it. They came from a sealed diocesan archive dated 1956. Ellen whistled. "From the St. Inez case?" Clara hesitated. "The mission's records, yes. Do it fast and off the books." Cross adjusted her glasses, scanning the typewritten lines. "Containment status, residual luminescence. This looks more like experimental protocol than theology. That's what worries me." The older woman leaned closer to one of the photographs, a blurred image of the effigy on the table. "Is this sculpture?" Clara didn't answer. Cross glanced at her sharply. "What did you find, Clara?" She looked away. "Something that shouldn't still be alive." By afternoon, the story was already gnawing at her inbox. 2 local journalists had left messages asking about her trip to San Gabriel Mission. The diocese had confirmed unauthorized entry. Someone had reported her license plate. She spent the rest of the day in her office with the blinds drawn, rereading every note she'd taken in the vault. Deliverance begins in silence. The phrase echoed whenever the building went quiet. At dusk, Ellen called. "You'd better come back. You need to see this yourself." The lab smelled of ethanol and ozone. Under the black light, the parchment strips glowed faintly, not with chemical residue, but from within the fibers themselves. Cross frowned. We tested for phosphor, strontium, even radium. Nothing. It's not contamination. It's biological. Living tissue would fluoresce like this under certain wavelengths, but this is paper. Clara felt the hairs on her arms rise. The files described a phenomenon. Luminescence following isolation. Ellen nodded slowly. If that's true, the paper isn't inert. It's carrying whatever was in that room. The light from the parchment flickered once, synchronizing for an instant with the pulse in Clara's wrist. She stepped back quickly, knocking over a tray of slides. Glass shattered across the floor. "Clara?" "I'm fine," but her voice sounded distant, metallic in her ears. Cross crouched to collect the shards. "You're shaking." "It's just fatigue." But she wasn't tired. She was wired, feverish, vibrating with something that wasn't adrenaline. Every light in the room seemed to flare brighter, edges sharpened, like the world had too much detail. She pressed her palm against the cold metal table, grounding herself. "What if," she said quietly, "they were trying to trap the light inside a person?" Ellen straightened slowly. Then they succeeded. Later, alone in her apartment, Clara replayed the cassette she'd salvaged from the mission. Most of the tape was static, but between the distortion, voices surfaced. Soft, female, chanting in unison. The language was Latin, but she caught fragments. Sub carn lux. Beneath flesh, light. A thud made her flinch. Her hallway light had gone out. In the dark reflection of the window, her face shimmered faintly, veins glinting gold where the moonlight touched them. The phone rang, unknown number. She answered. A man's voice, calm, clipped. "Miss Vale, you took property belonging to the church. Who is this?" "Return the documents to the Archdiocesan Tribunal." Tonight she froze. "And if I don't?" The silence on the other end was worse than any threat. Then, "The light chooses its vessel. We only manage the aftermath." Click. Clara stood motionless, listening to the dial tone. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, swallowed by the city hum. Her reflection in the glass moved a fraction after she did. The next morning she met Ellen at a diner near campus. The older woman looked pale. "Someone broke into the lab last night," she said. "Files gone, lights smashed. Whoever it was knew exactly what to take." Clara stirred her coffee. "They're covering their tracks." The church never left the site. They just changed names. Ellen studied her face. "You've got to slow down. You're trembling." Clara rubbed her wrist. "It's fine." But the faint light still pulsed beneath her skin, visible even in daylight now. "What did they do to those women?" Ellen asked softly. Clara looked up. They turned faith into an experiment. That evening, back in her office, she printed the image of the red door from her phone. The chalk letters, Sub carn lux, were still visible. She drew a line beneath them and wrote in pen, "If light exists beneath flesh, what happens when the flesh fails?" As she capped the pen, a low hum filled the room again, faint but rising. The fluorescent tubes above her flickered. One by one they dimmed until only the computer screen remained, casting her face in ghostly blue. She whispered into the silence, "Father Lemaire, if you're alive, I need to know what you saw." No answer, only the hum deepening into something almost melodic. Her phone buzzed. A new message, no sender, only coordinates and a single line, San Gabriel River. "Midnight, bring the papers." She stared at the screen until it went dark. Outside, thunder rolled over the city like a closing door. The coordinates led Clara Vale 30 miles east of the city, where the San Gabriel River bent through abandoned farmland and half-collapsed levees. The sky had already begun to drain of color when she parked beneath a cottonwood and killed the engine. Crickets filled the dusk. The smell of rain-soaked earth rose heavy around her. She slipped the folder of photocopied papers into her satchel and followed the GPS down a narrow path that used to be a service road. The river shimmered through the trees like dull metal. At the edge of the clearing stood a small corrugated shed, half sunken into the mud. A rusted cross was bolted above the door. Faded lettering read, St. Mary's Irrigation Station 3, a forgotten outpost of the convent's waterworks. Her flashlight caught fresh footprints in the silt. Someone else had come before her. She pushed the door open. Hinges squealed, echoing across the floodplain. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and oil. 2 filing cabinets leaned against the wall, drawers half open, their contents damp and curled. A makeshift desk stood in the center, a plank of wood across 2 crates, papers spread like relics. A lantern flickered beside them. "Dr. Vale?" a voice called quietly. She froze. From the shadow at the far corner, a man stepped forward. Thin, sun-creased, late 50s maybe. He wore a county utilities jacket, its badge worn blank. "I was told you might come," he said. "By who?" He nodded toward the river. "By whoever still listens." The words carried no irony. He introduced himself as Thomas Bell, Raymond's nephew. "My uncle left me his journals. Said if anyone ever asked about the sisters, to show them where the pipes end." He gestured to the floor. A metal hatch lay flush with the boards, sealed by a padlock long rusted shut. Clara crouched, brushing mud from the engraving. 1956, Wa Ordo Vacui Reservoir Access. "What's down there?" "Drain tunnel," Thomas said. "Feeds from the convent grounds to the river. But that's not all it carried." He pulled a yellowed map from his jacket pocket. The blue lines of the old irrigation system wound like veins across the page, converging under St. Mary's Hill. At the center, marked in red pencil, was a chamber labeled Resonance Vault. Clara traced the mark. The experiments were conducted below the convent. The runoff would have come here. He nodded. Every spring flood since then, this section glows for an hour or 2. Locals stopped fishing here decades ago. She felt the familiar unease crawl beneath her ribs. "Have you seen it yourself?" Thomas met her eyes. "Once. Looked like candlelight underwater, moving against the current." A gust rattled the shed. The lantern sputtered. For an instant, the reflection of the flame multiplied, one light becoming 6. "Show me the tunnel," she said. He hesitated. "You sure?" "Water's high. I need to know what's left." Together they pried the hatch open. A stairwell descended into darkness, water lapping halfway down. The stench of iron and algae rose thick. Clara slipped off her shoes, tied the flashlight to her wrist, and climbed after him. The passage narrowed quickly, echoing each breath. Patches of the wall shimmered faintly where minerals had crystallized, catching the beam like tiny mirrors. 10 yards in, the tunnel bent sharply. The sound of water deepened. When they rounded the corner, Clara stopped short. A low chamber opened before them, half flooded. The current drifted lazily around something that might once have been machinery. Pumps, gauges, copper wire coiled through the silt. On one panel, the same sigil appeared. A sunburst eye. Thomas lifted his lantern. "They said the vault overflowed that night." "My uncle found the water thick, like it carried dust or ash," Clara knelt, dipping a gloved hand into the current. It was cold enough to burn. Tiny motes of light floated in the black water, swirling like plankton. When she lifted her hand, they clung to the latex, glowing softly before fading. She whispered, "Residual luminescence." "Looks alive to me," Thomas muttered. "Maybe both." She filled a sample vial and sealed it. The moment she did, a tremor rippled through the tunnel. Small but distinct, like the ground exhaling. Water sloshed against the walls. Thomas steadied himself. That wasn't me. Clara listened. From somewhere deeper in the pipes came a hollow knocking, rhythmic, deliberate. 6 beats. Pause. 6 again. "The bell?" she breathed. They retreated toward the stairs, the sound following, metal on metal, echoing through the conduit until it seemed to beat inside their skulls. When they emerged into night air, the river looked darker than before. The sky had swallowed its stars, leaving only a faint glow beneath the surface, expanding in slow circles. Thomas whispered, "It's never this strong." The glow pulsed once, and for a heartbeat Clara saw outlines beneath the water, 6 silhouettes kneeling, heads bowed, hair drifting like kelp. Then the river broke into ripples, and the image was gone. Her heart hammered. "Tell no one about this," she said. "Not yet." He nodded, terrified, grateful. As she turned to leave, he called after her. "If it's starting again, what do we do?" Clara looked toward the horizon, where lightning flickered without thunder. "We listen, and we find who's still ringing the bell." That night, back in her apartment, she placed the vial on her desk. The particles inside floated weightless, pulsing gently. She began typing her field report, but halfway through, the computer screen dimmed, then brightened again, synchronizing with the light in the vial. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt recognized. The coordinates from Thomas's notebook led Clara Vale to a town that barely existed. Elbridge, population 312, a cluster of weather-worn buildings around a single steeple. The bell in that tower, she'd read, was cast from melted church relics in 1910. The parish's caretaker on record was R. Bell. When she stepped from her car, the evening smelled of dust and mesquite. The bell tolled once, low, resonant, nothing supernatural about it. Yet her pulse quickened all the same. Inside the church, the air was dry and heavy with wax. A man knelt near the altar, polishing brass candlesticks. His back was thin, his hair silver. "Mr. Bell?" He turned. His face might once have been handsome, but had gone brittle with age. "Raymond was my father," he said quietly. "I'm Robert." Clara blinked. "Your father?" "Raymond Bell died last year." He nodded. "That's what they wrote when they signed his papers and told him he'd never leave this hill again." The room seemed to narrow. "You're saying—" He gestured for silence, glancing toward the pew shadows. "Walls have ears, Doctor." Even here she followed him through a side door into the vestry, where the smell of cedar and old wine replaced incense. A small radio played faint static on the shelf. He turned the volume higher before speaking. "My father wasn't supposed to meet you. The letter he sent was meant for me. You intercepted it." Clara felt the hair rise on her arms. "Then who did I speak to at the convent?" Robert's expression darkened. "Something that remembers him." He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder bound with twine. "The church called it Custodia Campana, the bellkeeper. Each diocese appointed one. We made sure the resonance never rose again." He spread out faded photographs. The St. Mary's bell tower, a team of workmen lowering the bronze bell into its frame, and a diagram of tuning forks calibrated to precise frequencies. "It's not the metal," he said. "It's what's cast inside it." Clara frowned. "Inside the bell?" He nodded. "Bone dust. From the original sisters. They thought if the remains were fused with consecrated bronze, the silence would stay bound. But metal remembers sound." She stared at him. "You expect me to believe the tolling I heard is made by the dead?" Robert's smile was sad. "Not made by." Echoed through. He poured 2 glasses of water, his hands trembling slightly. "They told us to ring it once each year, same night, same hour. Tradition, they said. Containment in truth. When the bell goes silent, the vault stirs." Clara tried to steady her voice. "And this year it rang by itself." He looked down. "That's why I called you. I'm too old to climb the tower now. Someone, or something, rang it for me. They climbed the narrow staircase together, lantern light swinging over stone. The bell loomed above them, immense, dark, crusted with verdigris. Faint Latin inscriptions circled its rim. Robert touched the bronze reverently. You can still see it if the light's right. He held the lantern closer. Within the green corrosion, a faint glimmer pulsed, threads of gold like veins under skin. Clara reached out. The surface felt warm. A hum moved through her fingertips. It's alive, she whispered. Alive enough to listen, he said. They both jumped as a gust of air swept through the tower. The rope shivered. The lantern flickered. For a heartbeat, the bell vibrated without sound, then stilled. Robert's breath came ragged. That's how it starts. Clara steadied him. Who else knows about this? No one living. The diocese cut the funding, burned the files. My father tried to warn them, but by then, he trailed off, staring through the slats at the valley below. By then it had chosen another voice. Her stomach turned. Aurelia. He nodded slowly. Every keeper dreams of her face. We ring so she stays asleep. Clara studied the bell, the shimmer threading through its patina. The rhythm matched her own pulse. She thought of the vial on her desk, the particles floating in time with her heartbeat. What happens if it wakes? She asked. He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw fear stripped of superstition, pure human terror. The light spreads. It doesn't burn, it remembers. And when memory becomes the air itself, no one forgets again. Below them, thunder rolled across the plains. Back in the nave, Robert rummaged through a chest and produced a thin notebook bound in leather. My father's last log, he said. Every time the bell rang without a hand, he wrote it down. Clara opened it carefully. The entries were sparse but meticulous. March 12th, 1957. 6 tolls, windless night. Vault remains sealed. March 12th, 1969. Bell vibrated during eclipse. Brief light observed in river water. March 12th, 1999. First female voice recorded in resonance. Name unclear. March 12th, 2023. Voice said, "Open." She closed the book, her heart pounding. You think it wants out. Robert exhaled slowly. I think it already is. You brought a piece with you. Clara stiffened. He pointed to her wrist. Even in the dim light, the faint golden pulse was visible beneath her skin. Whatever it is, he said softly, it follows lineage. And maybe now it's found a keeper who doesn't need a bell. The wind outside shifted, carrying the smell of rain. The church creaked as if settling. Clara backed toward the door, notebook clutched to her chest. If what you're saying is true, then silence won't protect us anymore. Robert's voice echoed after her. Then perhaps sound will. Outside, night had fallen in full. The bell tolled once. No rope moving, no wind. The vibration ran through her bones like a heartbeat shared between earth and sky. She started the car, gripping the wheel until her knuckles whitened. In the rearview mirror, the church tower glowed faintly, gold veins pulsing along its edges. For the first time, she realized the story she'd been chasing was no longer history. It was transmission. By dawn, Clara Vale was back in Austin with rain streaking her windshield like static. The bell's toll still rang in her ribs. Every few seconds she caught herself glancing at the sky, half expecting it to flash gold. She went straight to the University Acoustics Laboratory, the one department quiet enough to hide her work. The night guard let her in without question. Most of the physics staff were still asleep. The air smelled of ozone and warm circuitry. She set the vial on the central isolation table. Inside, the motes of light drifted lazily, faint as fireflies. Her plan was simple: measure, record, explain. Anything but believe. The equipment hummed to life. Microphones sensitive enough to hear dust land on glass, frequency scanners that painted sound as color. She slid the vial under the sensors and began a sweep from 20 hertz up through ultrasonic ranges. At first, nothing. Then the monitor flickered. A pulse repeating every 6 seconds, not random, but structured. She magnified the pattern. The waveform looked almost musical. A slow, rising chord, decaying, then repeating. Like the bell, she whispered. She recorded 5 minutes, then reversed the sample. The shape inverted perfectly. When she played it back, the lab filled with a deep harmonic drone that vibrated through the floor. The lights dimmed. A nearby oscilloscope froze, its green line forming a perfect circle. An impossible signature. Clara killed the power. The silence that followed was thicker than before, pressing against her eardrums. The vial glowed brighter, responding to absence. She called Ellen Cross. "I need another set of ears," Clara said. "It's 6 in the morning," Ellen mumbled. "I think the sample's responding to sound." 30 minutes later, Ellen arrived, hair damp from rain, coffee in hand. Clara replayed the recording. The older woman frowned. "That's not resonance. That's feedback from an external source." "There is no external source," Clara said. "Everything's shielded." Ellen leaned closer to the vial. "Maybe it's photonic reaction, luminescent bacteria." Clara shook her head. "Watch," she whispered near the glass, barely audible. "Aurelia." The mote stirred, gathering toward her voice, forming a spiral that tightened like a listening ear. Ellen stepped back. "Jesus, Clara, I ran white noise tests." "It only reacts to language. Latin most strongly, say something else." Clara hesitated then. Sub Carn Lux. The vial flared, flooding the room with pale gold. Instruments whined. One monitor cracked. The waveform on the main screen stabilized into a symbol, circular, cross-shaped, identical to the one stamped on the old files. Ellen turned off the generator. "You just activated something." "No," Clara whispered, trembling. "It activated me." They took a break in the hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Clara's hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Think about it," she said. "Sound becomes structure. Structure becomes light. If faith is a frequency, maybe they found it and tried to trap it." Ellen sipped her coffee. "You realize how you sound right now? Like a scientist describing a miracle. Like a witness describing an infection." Clara met her eyes. "Maybe both." When they returned, the vial's glow had faded, but faint lines of condensation formed symbols across the inside of the glass, letters written from within. "Open." Ellen stared. "We need to get this into containment." Clara nodded but didn't move. "I need one more test. The bell's note is F-sharp below middle C. If the light carries its resonance, maybe that's its key." She tuned the generator, heart hammering. The note filled the room, pure, unwavering. The motes ignited instantly, swirling faster until they became a single column of gold. Air vibrated like stretched metal. On the monitor, new waveforms appeared, 6 vertical lines, one for each sister. Then, between them, a 7th line began to form. Ellen's voice trembled. "Clara, turn it off." But the controls no longer responded. The generator kept humming, louder, brighter. Papers lifted from the desks. The column widened, reaching toward the ceiling vent, light spilling through the cracks. Clara shouted over the noise. "It's matching amplitude, feeding off the tone." She grabbed the main breaker and yanked it down. Everything went black. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then the emergency lights flicked on. The vial lay shattered on the floor, its contents gone. Ellen whispered, "Where did it—" A soft glow pulsed from under Clara's skin, along her throat and wrists, fading as quickly as it came. She felt neither pain nor fear, only an immense, dizzy calm. She knelt, gathering the broken glass. The air smelled faintly of roses and static. Ellen touched her shoulder. "We're not safe here." Clara looked up, eyes reflecting the emergency lights like mirrors. "Neither is it. It's looking for somewhere to belong." They sealed the lab and left through the side door just as campus security pulled into the lot, sirens slicing the early light. The storm that had hovered all week was breaking again, thunder rolling low and constant. Clara glanced back through the glass wall of the lab. For a moment she thought she saw 6 silhouettes standing amid the instruments, heads bowed in silent prayer. Then the lights blinked out. Rain sheeted across the windscreen as Clara Vale guided the car through Austin's pre-dawn emptiness. Beside her, Ellen Cross sat gripping a thermos like a weapon. Neither had spoken since leaving the lab. Lightning flared, revealing the angular silhouette of the Archdiocesan Library, a fortress of limestone and glass built over older catacombs. The place was closed at this hour, but Clara still carried her researcher's keycard. They parked under the eaves and ran through the rain. The card beeped, the door unlocked, and the scent of paper and wax enveloped them. Ellen wiped her glasses. "What exactly are we looking for?" "The bell's resonance chart," Clara said. "If it was tuned to a specific frequency, that's the key to containing whatever's left. And if it isn't containable, then at least we'll know what's coming." The main hall was vast, domed, lit only by emergency lamps. Water dripped through a crack in the ceiling, rhythmic as a metronome. Their footsteps echoed as they descended the marble stairs to the lower stacks. Clara's keycard triggered a click, and a metal gate slid open. Inside, the air was 10 degrees colder. The shelves ran in long, perfect rows, decades of theology, burial registers, and classified correspondence. They moved by flashlight. Dust swirled in the beams like smoke. Ellen whispered, "Feels like a mausoleum." "It is," Clara replied. They found the restricted section marked Canticle Program. Most drawers were empty, records already purged, but one steel cabinet resisted when Clara pulled. She jimmied the lock with a letter opener, metal scraping metal until it gave way with a sigh. Inside were 3 file boxes and a reel-to-reel tape labeled Campana, bass frequency. Ellen grinned weakly. "There's your bell." They carried the tape to the listening booth, a small soundproof room lined with red felt. The player whirred reluctantly to life. Static filled the speakers, then a low hum began to build. Rich, layered, strangely human. Clara adjusted the dial. The sound deepened until it felt physical, pressing against their ribs. "That's F sharp," she murmured. Ellen frowned. "It's shifting. There's another tone weaving under it." The air inside the booth quivered. Papers rustled on their own. Clara turned the volume down, but the sound continued even after the machine stopped. The floor vibrated faintly. Somewhere beyond the glass, a row of fluorescent lights flickered to life one by one down the corridor. "Someone else is here," Ellen whispered. They stepped out, flashlights trembling. The library had gone utterly silent except for the ticking of water from the ceiling. Then, footsteps, slow and deliberate, from the upper gallery. "Security?" Clara called. No answer. She and Ellen ducked behind a row of shelves. The footsteps drew nearer. A figure appeared at the far end, a man in a black cassock, his face shadowed. He stopped at the cabinet they'd opened, ran a hand across the broken lock, then turned toward them as if following scent instead of sound. Ellen's breath caught. "Clara?" The man's voice was calm, patient. "You shouldn't have woken it." He stepped into the light. His eyes were pale, glassy. Robert Bell. But his expression was wrong, fixed, empty. Clara whispered, "That's not him." The air seemed to ripple around him, faint gold veins threading through his skin like cracks in porcelain. "You broke the seal," he said. "Now silence wants its voice." He raised a hand, and the hum returned. Low, resonant, filling the hall. The shelves shuddered. Books slid free and thumped onto the floor. Clara grabbed Ellen's wrist and ran. They sprinted down the central aisle, papers spiraling in the air like feathers. The exit door loomed ahead. She slammed her keycard against the reader. Nothing. Power dead. The hum swelled behind them, now more like chanting. Ellen pointed toward a narrow stairway leading deeper into the building. Basement! They descended into the archival vaults. The sound followed, echoing through stone, vibrating in bone. At the base of the stairs, a heavy door stood open. Inside waited the Silence Archive, rows of sealed glass cases containing relics confiscated from heretical orders. Statues, chalices, journals. Clara slammed the door shut and jammed a metal rod through the handle. For a moment, only their breathing filled the space. Then she noticed the faint light emanating from the cases. Each artifact glowed softly, rosaries, icons, fragments of parchment, like constellations in the dark. Ellen whispered, "It's all connected." Every relic they ever silenced, Clara approached a case containing a broken crucifix. The light within it pulsed in sync with the hum seeping through the floor. "Sound is memory," she said. They didn't destroy the voices, they archived them. The humming deepened into a pattern, rhythmic, almost intelligible. She realized the tones were forming words. Subcarnlux. Deliverance begins in silence. Ellen backed away. "Clara, it's calling you." Clara's pulse thrummed to the same rhythm. "No, it's calling through me." The door rattled violently, the metal bar bending. Robert's voice seeped through. "The bell must ring again." The glass cases began to tremble, light bleeding into the air like smoke. Clara clutched the reel-to-reel tape, its plastic warm against her palm. "If I can find the counter frequency, we can stop it." "How?" Ellen shouted over the growing noise. "By making it hear itself." She set the tape back on the player, reversed the reel, and hit play. The sound that burst forth was jagged, raw, the bell's own tone inverted. The vibration collided with the hum outside, two waves canceling. The lights flickered, dimmed, then flared blinding white. The glass cases shattered in unison. When the noise finally died, silence returned like a vacuum. Ellen coughed, eyes watering. "Did it work?" Clara looked around. The relics lay in shards, their glow extinguished. Above, the footsteps were gone. Then, from the cracked speaker, a voice, Aurelia's, soft, almost kind. "You cannot unring what was meant to call." When dawn broke, the city sounded wrong. Not louder, emptier. The kind of quiet that came after sirens, after confessions, after everything that mattered had already been said. Clara Vale sat in her apartment, headphones around her neck, the broken reel-to-reel tape on her desk. Her computer hummed, screens filled with waveforms she didn't remember uploading. Somewhere in the night, something had copied itself. The file title glared on every window, Campana Reversed.wav. Ellen sat across from her, pale, hair damp from rain. "Tell me that's not online." Clara rubbed her eyes. "It's everywhere. The autosync sent it to my cloud before we shut the power. Hundreds of downloads already. Some accounts I've never seen." Ellen leaned forward. "Then you've just broadcast whatever that was to the entire world." "Not whatever," Clara whispered. "Whoever." At 8:17 a.m., local radio stations began cutting out mid-broadcast. For 10 seconds at a time, static warped into a low, droning tone. The same frequency they'd heard in the archive. People thought it was interference from the storm. But those who listened long enough reported the same thing. Whispers in the static, phrases half-remembered from scripture. By noon, 3 churches across Travis County had reported structural vibrations in their bell towers. One bell, St. Hildegard's, cracked clean through while no one was touching it. The news cycle branded it the counterpoint phenomenon. To Clara, the name felt wrong. Counterpoint implied harmony. What she'd heard was possession. They met Detective Ray Garza in a cafe on the east side, the only place still playing music instead of talk radio. He looked exhausted, his badge tucked under his jacket like something shameful. 2 more churches this morning, he said. Bell towers shaking like they're alive. My captain says it's weather resonance. I say, he glanced at Clara. I say it's you. Clara didn't deny it. We reversed the bell's tone. It shouldn't have propagated. Garza dropped a folded newspaper onto the table. On the front page was a photograph of a cracked bronze bell, its surface patterned with thin concentric lines, circles within triangles. The same symbol from the convent walls, he said. Whatever you dug up in that archive, it's spreading. Ellen stared out the window. Then someone's amplifying it. Garza nodded grimly. The diocese issued a statement this morning. They're reopening St. Aurelia's ruins for restoration, but my contact says it's a cover for containment. Clara frowned. Containment won't work. It's not confined to stone anymore. It's in the air, in data. It's digital sound now. Then how do we fight a ghost that travels by signal? Garza asked. She looked at the waveform flickering on her phone. With another ghost. That evening, Clara returned to the university acoustics lab. Every surface buzzed faintly, the hum woven through the circuitry like a background prayer. She downloaded the reversed file and opened it in the analyzer. The spectrogram displayed a pattern she hadn't noticed before. Faint vertical pulses forming a shape. A cruciform lattice repeating every 33 seconds. Hidden in sound. A map. She played the file backward, then forward again, overlaying both signals. The peaks aligned perfectly, canceling most of the sound until only one whisper remained beneath the static. Find the stillness below the tone. Her pulse quickened. Beneath the tone, the vault. By midnight, she and Ellen were back on the river road, rain returning in thin, needling sheets. The ruins of St. Mary's Hill glimmered ahead, half demolished, floodlights burning against the fog. Garza waited near the gate in an unmarked car. You sure about this? He asked. No, Clara said. But if the signal's bleeding through, the source is still active down there. Maybe the countertone isn't enough. We might need silence itself. Silence itself? Garza raised an eyebrow. Every resonance has a null frequency, Clara explained. The sound of perfect stillness. If we can find it, record it. We might erase the rest. Ellen shivered. Erase? Or wake? No one answered. They descended the cracked stairway beneath the old chapel. The floodwater had receded, leaving slick stone and scattered candles burned down to wax puddles. The deeper they went, the stronger the hum grew, a vibration that resonated through marrow rather than air. At the base, the circular chamber awaited, walls etched with the same sigil, but now pulsing faint light as though breathing. The pool at its center rippled, though there was no wind. Garza steadied his flashlight. This place shouldn't even exist. They filled it with concrete in '68. Then something unfilled it, Clara said. Ellen crouched near the water. Listen. The tone was softer now, almost melodic. A sequence of 5 notes repeating, familiar but incomplete. Counterpoint, Clara murmured. It's waiting for response. She pulled a small digital recorder from her bag. If we record silence here, maybe it'll absorb the missing frequency. Garza scoffed. You really think you can record silence? Clara closed her eyes. Every silence is made of something. Even absence has a sound. She pressed record. The tone rose in pitch. Light bled up the walls, gold-white, filling the chamber until every crack glowed. The reflections on the water began to shift. 6 shapes now, not 5. Veiled figures standing ankle-deep in their own echoes. Ellen stumbled back. Clara, stop! But Clara couldn't. The recorder in her hand vibrated violently, numbers on its display spinning backward. The sound inverted itself, collapsing into a pressure so immense the air seemed to fold. Then, just as suddenly, it ended. The chamber went dark. The recorder clicked off on its own. Garza exhaled shakily. "Is that done?" Clara looked down at the device. Its screen showed a single new file, nulltone01.wav. She played it through the speaker. There was nothing. No hiss, no hum, only absolute perfect stillness. Yet as they stood there, each of them felt the same thing. A presence, vast and patient, listening back. When they emerged into the night, the floodlights above flickered once and died. Across the river, bells began to toll in distant sequence. 6 of them, perfectly spaced. Ellen whispered, "6 nuns." Garza stared toward the sound. "You said it was 6 who vanished in 56, right? All 6 just gone?" Clara nodded slowly. 6. And in 70 years, no one has ever found a single body. "Maybe it wasn't missing," he said. "Maybe it was waiting." The wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of the reversed tone, but this time woven with another layer, female voices, chanting in harmony. For a moment, it was almost beautiful. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped, and the world felt too quiet again. The recording was only 11 seconds long. 11 seconds of nothing. Clara listened to it for hours. Through headphones, through speakers, through the thin bones behind her ears. It wasn't silence. It was absence. The kind that eats sound from the inside out. Every time she played it, nearby noise seemed to falter. The hum of her fridge stuttered. The clock hesitated between ticks, and the night traffic outside dissolved into faint static. By morning, Austin itself felt quieter. Ellen arrived pale and sleep-deprived, clutching 2 coffees. They shut down half the radio band. FCC's getting complaints. Dead air, they call it. But people aren't just losing broadcast, they're losing sound. Whole blocks reporting a hush that won't lift. Clara rubbed her temples. "The null tone's expanding. You uploaded it?" "No, I only analyzed." She stopped. Her laptop screen pulsed once, dimmed, then filled with a waveform identical to nulltone 01. It had copied itself again. Ellen swore under her breath. "It's moving on its own." Clara stared at the shape. "Or someone's guiding it." At 10:04 a.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. A male voice, crisp, official. "Dr. Vale, this is Father Santo from the Archdiocese Inquiry Office. We require the audio sample you recorded last night." Clara froze. "You were monitoring us." "The Church monitors everything that bleeds into sanctified frequency," the voice replied evenly. "That file isn't a sound. It's a doorway. If you keep playing it, others will follow." Then the line clicked dead. Ellen whispered, "They're coming." By midday, 3 black sedans parked across the street. Men in clerical coats waited inside, hands folded, eyes hidden behind tinted glass. Clara packed fast. Laptop, recorder, copies of her data on an external drive. Ellen grabbed the reel tape, Campana reversed, and the 2 slipped out the back stairwell. They didn't drive. They walked. Through alleys thick with the metallic smell of rain. Somewhere bells began to ring again, the same 6-note pattern repeating across the city like heartbeat. At the river bridge, Detective Garza met them. He'd already guessed. "They've sealed off the ruins," he said. "No press, no drones. Church units and Haz suits. They say it's a chemical leak." Ellen laughed hollowly. "Sound is contagion." That's new. Garza eyed the recorder in Clara's bag. "You still have it?" She nodded. "Then you'd better tell me what it does before they take it." They ducked into an underpass, the roar of cars above masking their voices. Clara placed the recorder on a concrete ledge. "The null tone cancels vibration. But it's not mere cancellation. It erases resonance, permanently. The world needs resonance to exist. Garza frowned. You mean, if it keeps expanding, everything could fall still, completely still. No sound, no motion. The physical echo of divine silence, Ellen whispered. The sixth nun. Clara met her eyes. She wasn't missing. She was the silence. The vessel Garza blinked. You're saying she became this? Something like it. Clara opened her laptop, showing him an old photograph scanned from church archives. 6 veiled women standing before the convent. The fifth from the left, the one they'd never named, had her head slightly bowed, face erased by glare. Garza leaned closer. You think she's behind the signal? I think she's inside it. That night the city went dark. Power grids failed block by block until only emergency lights burned. Phones lost service. Even satellites flickered offline. The hum returned, soft, pervasive, rolling across the rooftops like wind through glass. Garza's radio sputtered to life, though it wasn't switched on. The null tone seeped from its speaker, steady and hypnotic. Ellen covered her ears. It's calling everyone, Clara whispered. No, it's choosing who listens. They fled to the university's underground acoustic chamber, the only soundproof space thick enough to block frequencies. Concrete walls 3 feet deep, padded doors bolted from inside. Once sealed, the world vanished into muffled heartbeat. Clara placed the recorder on the floor between them. If she's inside the tone, maybe she can hear me here. Garza shook his head. You're talking to a ghost encoded in noise. She's not a ghost, Clara said. She's faith uncontained. She pressed play. At first, nothing. Then, from the recorder's tiny speaker, a single note like breath through hollow wood. It wavered, multiplied, and formed a chord. 5 tones and a 6th emerging faintly beneath them. Ellen clutched Clara's arm. That's her! The sound thickened, weaving into language without words. The room seemed to expand, walls breathing outward. In the reflection of the observation glass, Clara saw 6 silhouettes standing behind her. One stepped forward. The figure's veil drifted like smoke, revealing a face not old, not young, calm, luminous, eyes filled with static. Clara's throat tightened. Sister Amara? The figure inclined its head. I kept the vow of silence. You broke it. The temperature dropped. Frost feathered the microphone cables. Clara steadied her voice. If silence is sacred, why infect the living? The apparition's mouth curved faintly. Because they prayed for proof. I answered. Garza drew his sidearm on instinct. Back away from her. The 6th nun turned toward him, and the gun's slide locked frozen, metal trembling. Violence cannot echo where there is no sound. Then she looked at Clara again. You want the tone contained. Then contain me. How? Return what was taken. The bell that called us the apparition dissolved, leaving the recorder hot to the touch. Its display glowed with new text. Aurelia, vault coordinates attached. Garza exhaled. She just gave us directions. Ellen whispered. To what? Clara stared at the numbers on the screen. To the original bell, the one they buried in 56. Garza holstered his weapon. Then that's where we end it. Clara nodded slowly. No, that's where she ends it. Outside the chamber, the first sirens began to wail again, but beneath them pulsed another sound. Softer, rhythmic. 6 notes, then silence. The vault lay 40 miles west of Austin, buried beneath what was once St. Mary's Hill. The diocese had covered it with concrete in 1957, renamed the land a retreat center, and then abandoned it again when the ground began to hum. Now floodlights crowned the hillside like an exorcism that never ended. Clara Vale stood at the gate with Ellen Cross and Detective Garza, the coordinates glowing on her phone. Rain fell in cold, needling sheets. The air itself seemed tuned to a frequency just below hearing, a vibration that lived in bone. "They're already here," Garza muttered. 3 unmarked vans idled near the main building, clerical silhouettes moving inside, containment priests, the church's quiet soldiers. Clara tightened the strap on her satchel. Inside, the recorder, the reversed reel, and the null tone. "We end it tonight," she said. Ellen's voice wavered. "End it or finish it?" Clara didn't answer. They slipped through the service corridor, down a stairwell slick with condensation. Emergency lights pulsed red along the walls. The deeper they went, the warmer the air grew, as if they were descending into breath. At the bottom, a concrete tunnel stretched ahead, sealed by a massive iron door engraved with the familiar sigil, an eye within a sunburst. Garza crouched beside the lock. No keypad. "Just this." He pointed to a small bronze plate stamped with musical notation, 6 notes etched in sequence. Ellen leaned closer. "It's a code." The bell's phrase, Clara took out the recorder. Or the key. She pressed play. The reversed campana tone spilled into the corridor, low and mournful. The bronze plate vibrated, glowing faintly. Bolts released one by one with soft metallic sighs. The door opened inward. The chamber beyond was vast, a cathedral carved underground. The roof arched so high the beams disappeared into darkness. In the center stood the bell, colossal, black with age, half buried in concrete and rust. Cables snaked from its frame to power consoles long dead. The air shimmered with faint gold dust that drifted like pollen. Ellen whispered, "It's still resonating." Clara approached. "This is where it began." A faint hum trembled underfoot, deep and rhythmic. She felt it match her heartbeat. Garza scanned the shadows with his flashlight. No priests, no guards. "Maybe they sealed it and left no," Clara said softly. "They're listening." She gestured upward. Along the walls, hidden speakers blinked tiny red LEDs. Live feeds. Ellen swore. "They're monitoring us remotely." Garza ripped one down. "Not anymore." The hum grew louder, gathering texture until it resembled a voice. Distant, feminine, countless at once, subcarne lux. The bell quivered. Flecks of bronze fell like rain. Clara stepped closer, laying a palm on the cold metal. The vibration slid into her skin, familiar, intimate. Her veins glimmered faintly beneath the sleeve of her coat. Ellen's voice shook. "Clara, you're syncing with it." "She's syncing with me," Clara murmured. "She wants her silence back." Garza shouted over the rising sound. "Then give it to her before this whole place comes down." Clara drew out the recorder. Its display flickered between files, campana reversed and null tone 01, as if waiting for her choice. She hesitated. The reversed tone had unleashed the voices. The null tone erased them. Both meant surrender. She selected both, pressed play. The 2 recordings collided, sound against absence, resonance against void. The bell responded instantly. The hum climbed through octaves, the air turning thick, liquid. The floor cracked, spilling dust that glowed. Ellen screamed, "Clara, it's destabilizing! I have to hold it, just until they cancel each other." She pressed both palms against the bell. Light burst through the seams of the metal, searing gold and white. Images cascaded across her vision. The 6 sisters kneeling, their mouths bound. The abbess raising her hands toward the bell. The flash of light that had ended everything. Then she saw Aurelia. Not dead, not alive. Her face both human and radiant. "You found the 7th, the vision whispered. Clara gasped. "You were the silence all along." Aurelia's expression softened. "I was the echo waiting for belief." The chamber convulsed. Cables snapped like whips, sparks raining. Garza dragged Ellen toward the door. "Clara!" Now, she barely heard him. The sound around her folded inward until there was only pulse. "Let it rest," Aurelia said. Clara nodded and released her grip. The recorder fell, shattering on the floor. The null tone spilled free, pure, steady, endless. The bell shuddered once, then dissolved into dust. Light surged upward through the chamber, filling every crack, washing over everything until there was nothing left but white. When consciousness returned, she was lying on the hillside beneath a washed-out sky. Rain had stopped. Morning light gilded the clouds. Ellen crouched beside her, tears and rain indistinguishable. "You're alive." Garza stood a few feet away, staring at the horizon. "The vault's gone, collapsed in on itself." No trace of the bell. Clara sat up slowly. The air was perfectly still. She could hear birds, wind, her own breath. Sound restored, ordinary, precious. Ellen handed her the recorder. It was cracked, but still warm. The screen displayed one new file, resonance_final.wav. "What's on it?" Ellen asked. Clara pressed play. A woman's voice filled the morning, clear, steady, human. "Deliverance ends in silence, but faith continues in the noise we make." The file ended with a single toll, one note, soft as a heartbeat. Garza exhaled. "Guess she finally stopped ringing." Clara smiled faintly. "No." She passed it on. The wind carried the echo down the valley, gentle, fading, then gone. Years later, the ruins of St. Mary's Hill lay quiet beneath a skin of wild grass, the earth sealed and still. Clara Vale returned only once, standing where the bell tower had been, the wind brushing through the reeds like the faintest choir. The recorder she carried no longer worked, yet when she pressed play, a single soft tone whispered through the static, a heartbeat of light beneath sound. The church called what happened a collapse, the scientists a resonance event. But Clara understood it differently. The six sisters had never truly vanished. They had become the silence between echoes, the pause that gives meaning to every prayer. She left the recorder on the altar stone and walked away. The valley hushed behind her, holding its secret.